Nia Barrett was wrongfully jailed at 17, framed by 3 racist cops who thought they'd buried her story for good. But 5 years later, at the exact bus stop where it all began, she knocks one of them flat in front of a stunned crowd. That punch wasn't revenge, it was a warning. Now, with old wounds reopened and the justice system watching, Nia isn't backing down. She's here to expose the truth they tried to erase. What did they do to her, and why is this single punch about to shake an entire courtroom? Have you ever seen justice strike back this hard? Comment below. Let's get into the story. It was 3:12 p.m. on a Thursday when Nia Barrett walked into the place that once shattered her. The downtown bus terminal looked the same. Same chipped benches, same flickering light above Route 12, same stench of fried food and diesel. But to Nia, it felt like standing inside a scar that had never truly closed. She paused near the bus map, pretending to scan it. But she wasn't waiting for a bus. Her fingers curled in her coat pockets, palms damp. Not with fear, with focus. She had rehearsed this moment for 5 years, not to destroy, but to face. A low whistle cut through the air. Well. Look who's out of her cage. She turned. Kyle Renner. Time hadn't softened him. His eyes still carried that lazy malice like cruelty came naturally. He sauntered toward her, flanked by officers Dean and Crowley, ghosts of a past that refused to stay buried. Kyle grinned. Didn't think they'd let your kind out so soon. Dean chuckled, cracking his knuckles. Crowley kept his hands on his belt gaze, sharp, like he was already weighing her worth again. Nia said nothing. She studied Kyle the way a surgeon might study a tumor, knowing exactly what needed to be removed. Kyle tilted his head, mock sympathy in his voice. You get yourself reformed in there, sweetheart. Or just better at lying, Dean added. Maybe she forgot how to shut up. That's what started it last time. Nia blinked slowly. No fear, no rage, just wait. You remember that day Kyle leaned closer. You cried. Real pretty. Didn't do you any good, though. That was it. She stepped forward one fluid motion and drove her fist into his face so cleanly it made a sound like a book slamming shut. Kyle's body dropped with a dull thud, mouth open, eyes wide, hands fumbling like he couldn't tell which way gravity worked anymore. Gasps erupted. Phones flew up. A toddler cried. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Dean reached for his cuffs but hesitated. Nia wasn't running. She stood there still as a statue carved from something harder than stone. Crowley took half a step, then stopped. His fingers twitched near his taser, but something in Nia's eyes made him reconsider. She turned slowly toward the crowd gathering near the benches. Every face wore the same question. She gave them her answer. Let them come, she said, voice calm, steady. I've got nothing to hide. Dean broke the silence. You're done. That's assault on an officer. Was he acting like one? She shot back, not even raising her voice. Or did you forget what he did to me too? Kyle groaned on the pavement, blood trickling from his nose. He tried to speak, but the words came out broken, slurred. A woman in a nurse's uniform pushed through the crowd. That girl, she didn't just hit him, she planted him. A few people laughed nervously. Others just stared, phones still recording. Somewhere behind them, sirens began to howl. But Nia didn't move. Her eyes swept the terminal. She saw a teenage boy filming on the edge of the crowd, his mouth open in awe. An older black man clutched his cane with white knuckles. A Latina mother whispered to her daughter, "Stay quiet, mija." Nia knew this wasn't just about her anymore. This was about every lie that had gone unchecked, every uniform that thought it meant untouchable, every courtroom that had slammed its doors before the truth could speak. She stepped over Kyle's sprawled legs, not with malice, but with purpose. And for the first time in years, her voice carried with the weight of someone unafraid to be heard. "You want to arrest me?" she said, looking Dean square in the eye. "Then do it. But this time, Make sure you get the whole video." The silence that followed was thicker than concrete. And then a reporter shoved a mic forward. "What's your name?" Nia looked into the lens. Her voice didn't shake. "Nia Barrett, the girl you locked up 5 years ago." The crowd inhaled all at once. She didn't say another word. She didn't have to. The storm had arrived. At 17, Nia Barrett still believed in the system. She thought if you told the truth, someone would listen. That the badge meant protection. That the courtroom cared about justice. She believed all of that until one rainy afternoon changed everything. It started at a corner store in Southbridge. Nia was holding a bottle of orange soda and a bag of sunflower seeds waiting in line. Kyle Renner had walked in with that same smug swagger, nodding at the clerk like he owned the block. Dean and Crowley followed seconds later. They barely looked at her, just muttered something, exchanged glances, and then suddenly, sirens, shouts, cold cuffs clamped around her wrists. "Ma'am said you stuffed something in your bag," Kyle sneered. "I didn't take anything," she whispered, stunned. "You gonna argue with security footage?" Dean said, pulling out a phone. He showed her a grainy clip, blurry hands, a hoodie like hers grabbing candy. It wasn't her. But it didn't matter. Crowley leaned close and said low enough that no one else could hear. "You think they'll look twice at a poor black girl with no lawyer?" That night, Nia sat alone in the precinct, crying into her sweatshirt sleeve. Her public defender walked in, middle-aged, rushed, tired eyes. "You don't want this to drag out," he said flatly. "Take the plea. It's just 6 months. You'll be out before senior year." She hesitated. "But I didn't do anything." He sighed. "Doesn't matter. They got tape. They got witnesses. The judge won't blink." She signed. She thought it'd be over, but it wasn't 6 months. It was 3 years. 3 years behind steel bars and cement walls. 3 years of silence and stares. Of being that girl, the thief, the liar, the forgotten. At first, she wrote to her mom every night. And Loretta never missed a week. Her handwriting always started the same. "My baby girl. I don't care what they say. I know who you are." She sent poems, scriptures, recipes, even copied song lyrics Nia used to sing when doing dishes. That woman held Nia's spirit together from miles away. Until the letters stopped. It was mid-autumn. Leaves were turning outside the fence and the wind had a bite. Nia kept checking mail call day after day. Nothing. Then 2 weeks later, Father Ben, one of the prison chaplains, asked to speak with her. She sat in the chapel knees, tight fingers clenched. He sat beside her, quiet, holding a folded piece of paper. "Your mother passed," he said gently. "It was cancer. She didn't want you to know she was sick." Nia didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just shut down. The chapel lights flickered overhead. Someone sang softly in another room. She stared at the floor until it blurred. "They buried her last Thursday," he added. Nia whispered, "Without me." Father Ben nodded. She stood slowly, walked to the back of her cell that night and sat in the dark for hours. The walls didn't speak. The bunk above creaked. She whispered into the silence, "I won't let them erase me." And something shifted inside her. From that day forward, she stopped waiting for the world to save her. She read law books, took notes, memorized dates, procedures, terms. She wrote letters, hundreds of them, to advocacy groups, to journalists, to civil rights attorneys. Most never replied. But it didn't matter, because one day she promised herself the world was going to hear her name again. Not as a number, not as a case file, but as a voice. And she was going to make damn sure they never buried her again. By noon, the clip of Nia's punch had hit every major outlet. By dusk, she was a headline. And yet, in her small, dim apartment, where even the light seemed to hesitate, Nia sat alone. No celebration, no relief, just silence. until a knock. She opened the door and froze. Tessa. There she was. Tessa Monroe. Same wild curls, same fierce eyes, same worn leather satchel clinging to her like armor. I saw the footage, Tessa said, and I knew it was you. Nia stepped aside without a word. They hadn't seen each other in 6 years. Not since that awful day in the courtroom when Nia was led away in cuffs and Tessa had tried helplessly to follow. They sat facing each other now, the weight of time pressing in. Finally, Tessa reached into her bag and pulled out a manila folder, edges frayed from too many nights, handled with doubt and hope. I never stopped, she said, placing it gently on the table. Nia blinked. Stopped what? Fighting for you. The folder opened. Inside, photocopies, notes, time-stamped statements, and a flash drive. When they arrested you, I knew something was wrong. I was just a student journalist then, but I dug. Tried to find the store's surveillance footage. It had been accidentally erased. I tracked down the clerk. He moved out of town. The plea deal rushed. Witnesses disappeared. It stunk. Nia's voice was low. I remember the silence. That was louder than anything. Tessa's eyes shone. I didn't stop because you didn't deserve to be forgotten, even if no one listened then. She paused, then slid over the flash drive. There was a guy, an IT worker from the store. He saw what they did. He backed up the video before it was wiped. Sent it to a friend who used to archive this kind of stuff for protection. A digital ghost town of deleted truths. You're telling me... Nia's voice cracked. Tessa nodded. I've seen the footage. You never even touched the shelf. Kyle bumped into you, planted something in your coat. Nia closed her eyes. Her fingers trembled. For 5 years, I thought it was my word against theirs. I thought I was disposable. You never were, Tessa said. They just counted on no one looking twice. They sat in silence. But it wasn't empty. It was full of breath held too long. Tessa leaned forward, her voice low but urgent. Justice came late, but truth can still speak, and something shifted. Nia looked up, eyes sharper now. So what do? We build the case ourselves, Tessa said, file by file, timestamp by timestamp. The rest of the night passed with quiet fury. They spread papers across the floor, plea transcripts, arrest reports, redacted names, and unexplained edits. Nia read each line like it was her own diary, every word soaked in memory. This is the minute they lied. That was the call from my mother they never let me take. This was the day the world stopped believing me. And then, there. A grainy image, a frozen frame. Kyle's hand slipped something into the sleeve of Nia's coat. The timestamp matched exactly. Clear as truth. Nia covered her mouth. Her whole body trembled. They knew, she whispered. They knew what they were doing. Tessa's voice was steady. And now the world will too. Nia turned toward her. Why now, Tessa? Why come back now? Tessa smiled gently. Because when that video surfaced, I knew the girl I once believed in had just thrown the first punch back. Nia exhaled, shaky, but sure. Then let's throw the next one together. As midnight crept in, the room was littered with evidence and half-drunk coffee. The world outside still slept in its indifference. But in that tiny apartment, 2 women, one broken by a lie, one fueled by truth, were building something louder than rage. They were building the reckoning. And for the first time in 5 years, Nia whispered to herself, not with fear, but with fire. They tried to erase me. But I'm still here. The morning after felt different. Nia hadn't slept. Neither had Tessa. But neither woman looked tired. Because for the first time in years, they weren't surviving, they were moving. I think I found someone, Tessa said over coffee, her eyes lit with cautious hope. Security guard from the old Westgate market. Name's Melvin Ruiz. Left the job shortly after your arrest. Why, Nia asked, already knowing the answer. Got threatened, quietly. They made it sound like downsizing, but he told someone it didn't feel right. They tracked him down 2 towns over a quiet man in his 50s who ran a small repair shop and didn't like talking about the past. But the moment he saw Nia, something broke in him. You shouldn't have been there, Melvin muttered, rubbing his face. I watched them. I wanted to say something, but I had a kid in college and Nia raised her hand gently. I'm not here for apologies. Melvin nodded, then walked into the back room. He came out holding a battered laptop and an old flash drive wrapped in electrical tape. I copied the footage, just in case. Told myself I'd delete it every year. Never did. Tessa took it like it was a sacred object. That night they sat at Nia's table, hands trembling as the video loaded. Grainy, slightly shaky, but clear enough. There she was, 17-year-old Nia browsing shelves. Kyle approached from behind, laughing, holding something in his hand. He bumped her, then subtly tucked a small object into her coat pocket. Nia looked startled. Crowley stood nearby, watching but saying nothing. Then Dean entered the frame, grabbed her, pointed to the security monitor, and within seconds, twisted her arm behind her back. Nia's mouth moved rapidly, clearly protesting, but there was no audio. The screen faded, and then a few more seconds appeared. Dean scribbling into a notepad, Kyle whispering something, and Crowley signing a report without looking up. No resistance. No theft. Just a setup. Tessa whispered, "This was never meant to see daylight." "Now it will," Nia said. They uploaded it to Truth Circuit, a fast-growing podcast known for exposing law enforcement cover-ups. Within 12 hours, the episode aired. It was raw. The host played the full video, broke it down frame by frame, and ended with one haunting question. How many other Nias are still locked away? The internet caught fire. TikTok edits, reaction videos, think pieces titled "The Girl Who Refused to Stay Buried." But not everyone cheered. By noon the next day, Kyle Renner, the officer Nia had punched, stood behind a podium flanked by his attorney Marcus Grant. "This is nothing more than an out-of-context smear campaign," Grant said, voice smooth as oil. "The footage has been selectively edited. We urge the public not to rush to judgment." Kyle stepped up to the mic. "I was doing my job. That girl was combative from the moment we approached. She's rewriting history." And just like that, the tide started to split. One side demanded justice, the other claimed manipulation. Some comments were outright cruel. "She's just playing victim for fame." Another thug pretending to be innocent. "That punch proves she's unstable." Nia sat quietly at her desk phone, buzzing with alerts she refused to read. "I thought the truth would be enough," she said. Tessa didn't flinch. The truth always threatens those who live by lies. They kept working. Late into the night, they compiled timestamps, identified inconsistencies in the arrest reports, pulled up body cam policies and department violations. But Nia couldn't shake it. The noise, the hate, the weight of being doubted again. She turned to Tessa. "What if this doesn't matter? What if they bury it again? People forget. They move on." Tessa leaned forward, her voice a low burn. "Then we remind them, over and over, until forgetting isn't an option." That night, Nia recorded a short voice clip for Truth Circuit. It wasn't polished. She didn't wear makeup. Her voice wavered at first. "My name is Nia Barrett. 5 years ago, I was arrested for a crime I didn't commit. Today, you saw the truth. You saw what they did to me. You saw how silence protects the guilty. But I'm not afraid anymore, because I'm not alone anymore." And just before the clip ended, she looked straight into the lens and whispered, "Let them try to bury me again. This time, I'll rise louder." The video hit 1 million views in 2 days. And somewhere in a dusty office at the police precinct, a warrant report flickered across a screen unread. But not for long. Because now the world was watching, and Nia Barrett was no longer a name in a sealed file. She was a movement. They didn't wait long. Just 3 days after the viral video dropped, the knock came at Nia's door. Hard, rhythmic, official. She opened it slowly, already sensing what waited outside. Kyle stood there flanked by 2 officers in plain clothes. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "You're being charged with felony assault on a police officer," he said, handing her the paper. "You think punching a cop in public was smart?" Dean stood behind him, arms crossed. Crowley, a few steps back, gazed down as always. Nia didn't flinch. "I didn't hit a cop," she said. "I hit a liar." Kyle's smirk twitched. "You can say that to the judge." They held her for 24 hours. It wasn't supposed to be that long, but Kyle knew how to twist the system. Dean signed a supplemental complaint. Crowley nodded quietly through his statement. And just like that, she was back inside. Not prison, a holding cell. But the fluorescent lights, the metal bench, the cold concrete, it all felt too familiar. For the first few hours, she sat straight, arms folded, staring into nothing. She could hear the echoes of her younger self, panicked 17, trying to breathe through betrayal. But night came. The lights never dimmed, and the silence pressed in. She curled up on the bench, wrapped in the same jumpsuit color as 5 years before. I shouldn't have punched him, she thought. I handed them exactly what they wanted. By morning, doubt had started to settle like fog in her chest. That's when she heard it. A voice. Sharp, calm, clear. "Miss Barrett." She sat up. A tall black man in a navy blue suit stepped into the hallway. He looked like he didn't blink much, like he didn't raise his voice unless it was absolutely necessary. "My name is Jordan Fields," he said. "I'm your attorney." "I didn't call anyone," Nia said slowly. "No," he replied. "But the people who believe in you did." Outside, the press was already circling the courthouse. Jordan led her past them with a hand lightly on her shoulder. Not pushing, not shielding, just walking beside her. "They want a show," he murmured. "Let them get confused instead." Inside, Kyle's team presented their case. The punch was caught on multiple cameras. It was assault. He was in uniform. His witnesses were fellow officers. His lawyer, Marcus Grant, spoke with just enough disgust to sound disappointed, not angry. Then Jordan stood. "Your Honor," he said, "we have a video one that shows not just the impact, but what led up to it." It was grainy but powerful footage from a civilian across the street. A woman who'd been filming a street band at the bus stop caught everything. Kyle approaching, laughing, gesturing at Nia's body, the way he leaned too close. The things he said muffled but not hard to guess. Then Nia's hand flying fast, precise. A single blow, no flurry of violence. Just that. The judge watched it twice. Jordan didn't even look at the courtroom. He kept his eyes on the judge. She was provoked. She was cornered. And after what this man and his department did to her 5 years ago, you'd be hard-pressed to find a jury that wouldn't understand why she didn't just walk away. A beat. "Dismissed," the judge said. Outside, the air tasted different. The crowd was split, some angry, some cheering. Reporters shouted questions. Jordan didn't answer any of them. But Nia did. Just one. A young woman with a shaky mic asked, "Do you regret it?" Nia turned to the cameras. Her voice was low, steady. "I regret that they ever had the chance to put their hands on me in the first place." And then she walked. Later that day, in a small cafe booth with Jordan and Tessa across from her, Nia finally exhaled. Jordan pushed a folder toward her. "You've survived more than most, but surviving isn't enough anymore." She opened the folder. Inside, legal documents, a timeline, a motion request. "What is this?" she asked. Jordan smiled, eyes intense. "A civil rights lawsuit. We go after their records. We demand depositions. And this time, we don't do it quietly." Tessa added, "The public is listening, but they need something real to follow, something that doesn't die when the headlines fade." Nia looked down at her hands. They weren't shaking. "Then let's make noise," she said. Jordan leaned back, a rare grin breaking through. "You survived their silence," he said. "Now let's make them speak." The courthouse on Jefferson Street hadn't changed in years, same chipped marble floors, same creaking wooden benches. But this time, Nia Barrett walked in, not as the scared girl they once locked away, but as a woman forged in silence, returning not for revenge, but for truth. Judge Avery Sinclair presided over the courtroom with a reputation of being fair but firm. He had the kind of presence that silenced a room just by entering it. As he adjusted his glasses and looked at the docket, he barely glanced up when he said, "Barrett versus Renner. Let's proceed." Nia stood heart steady, chin lifted, but she could feel Sinclair's eyes finally landing on her. And there it was. Not hostility, but doubt. He had read her file. He had seen the charge. He had not yet seen the woman. On the opposing bench, Marcus Grant, the city prosecutor turned private defense attorney, smiled thinly. His suit was sharp, but his words sharper. "Your Honor, we're dealing with a known offender. A woman who at 17 pled guilty to theft. Jordan Fields stood before Marcus could go further. Calm, precise, deliberate. Objection. That plea was extracted under coercion from a public defender with a 30-case overload. Let's not confuse illegal cornering with guilt." Grant turned. "Is that your angle, counselor? That the system is always to blame? That every criminal is just misunderstood?" Jordan didn't flinch. "No. Just that not every arrest is justice, and not every badge is truth." The tension in the courtroom thickened like a fog. Outside the courthouse, the media had gathered. What had started as a viral video of a punch had turned into a conversation larger than any of them expected. Foxlight News. A conservative outlet aired a segment titled, "Another Angry Black Girl Punches a Cop and the Left Applauds." The host chuckled. You'd think she won a Nobel, not landed a blow. Inside the courtroom, Nia heard none of it, but she felt it. The weight of being misnamed, misjudged. Again. Marcus leaned into his rhythm, showing grainy courtroom photos of Nia from 5 years ago, shackled, hunched, frightened. "This is who we're dealing with," he said, clicking through slides. "Not the composed woman you see today, but the teenager who stole and swung at an officer. That's the record. That's the truth." But Jordan walked to the center of the courtroom, holding nothing. No photos. No props. Just voice. The truth. Mr. Grant is more than paperwork and perception. It's why she was alone when that plea was signed. It's what happened in that holding cell. It's the tape that never made it to court. And it's every voice that's been silenced along the way because the system didn't think she'd fight back. Judge Sinclair watched them both, still unmoved, still unreadable. That night, Tessa Monroe sat in her cramped studio apartment editing her response. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, thinking not as a journalist, but as a witness to her friend's erasure. She uploaded the piece to her platform Justice Circuit under the title, "Angry Number Just Finally Heard." The article was part fact, part fire. It chronicled Nia's false conviction, her time in prison, her mother's death. It laid bare the uncomfortable truth that systems forget Black women on purpose, and that remembering them takes work. By morning, the article had been shared over 100,000 times. But it wasn't just the numbers, it was the comments. One said, "I was on that jury. They didn't show us the whole thing." Another, "My daughter went through the same thing in Tampa. She never recovered." And buried halfway down the thread was one that simply read, "I remember Nia. I worked in that courtroom. She was just a kid. Some of us never forgot." Back in court, the shift was subtle but real. A courtroom clerk handed Judge Sinclair a printout of the article before recess. He read the title, paused, then turned to Nia during the next session with something slightly different in his tone, not sympathy, but curiosity. Marcus noticed too. He leaned toward Kyle Renner, whispering sharply, We're losing the narrative. Keep your cool on the stand. Kyle clenched his jaw. She hit me. She hit back. Marcus hissed. There's a difference. During lunch break, as Nia stepped outside for air, a young woman approached her. Late 20s Nurse Scrub's wide eyes. You probably don't remember me, she said, her voice tight. My mom was in lockup with you once. You told her a story about your mom's letters. She used to talk about it every night before bed. Nia froze. She's sober now. Has a job. She says you saved her. The girl handed Nia a folded piece of paper. On it was a handwritten note. Some of us never forgot you. Nia stood on the courthouse steps, letter in hand, wind pulling at the edge of her coat. She looked up at the building not in fear but in defiance. The courtroom may have been built to forget her, but she was not there to be forgotten. It was just past 10 a.m. when the double doors creaked open. The courtroom had settled into routine by then. Motions, objections, long stares. But what happened next shattered all rhythm. A woman walked in quietly. Short, gray blazer badge still clipped to the lapel hair pinned up like she hadn't changed it since her last patrol. She moved with the steady tension of someone carrying too much for too long. Her name was Linda Greer. Nia blinked. Tessa froze. Even Jordan paused mid-sentence. She's here, Tessa whispered under her breath. Linda took the stand like it was her final confession. Voice, steady, eyes firm. She didn't glance at Kyle. Not once. I worked with Officer Renner from 2014 to 2019. I left the force 3 weeks after the Barrett arrest. Why, Jordan asked gently. Linda looked straight ahead. Because I saw what he did, and I didn't stop it. The courtroom didn't move, not even a cough. She continued. Kyle had this method. He'd provoke young black men, shove insults sometimes more. Then write reports that flipped the story. If anyone questioned it, he'd say, they fold when you press hard enough. That was his line. Marcus Grant was on his feet in a flash. Your Honor, this is hearsay. She has no verified documentation of this behavior. Avery Sinclair didn't blink. Let's hear her out. Linda reached into her worn leather bag and pulled out a flash drive. Actually, I do. She handed it to the bailiff. These are internal recordings from Kyle's cruiser during his patrols. I downloaded them before I resigned. I couldn't live with it. The judge leaned forward. And you're only bringing this now. I was scared, Linda said, her voice cracking for the first time. But I watched what they did to this girl, and I couldn't stay silent anymore. The audio file clicked on overhead. Kyle's voice echoed through the chamber. Casual, smug. They lie, they run, they break. You gotta catch them off guard. Push hard, let them snap. They always do. Then it's game over. The air changed. The judge's pen paused mid-stroke. Her fingers trembled slightly. Only those watching closely would have seen it. Marcus looked like someone had knocked the wind out of him. Dean shifted in his seat. Crowley looked down. The file ended. Silence stretched thick and trembling. Jordan stood slowly, voice calm but waited. Your Honor, this isn't just about one woman wrongfully jailed. It's about a culture that believed it could warp truth without consequence. Linda wiped the corners of her eyes but didn't break down. She had waited years for this moment, and now she stood in the wreckage of her own silence. Judge Sinclair didn't say a word. She just stared forward as if seeing something she could no longer ignore. Maybe it was the ghost of every name she'd dismissed too easily. Or maybe, just maybe, it was her own complicity staring back. And for the first time in that trial, the court was no longer divided between past and present. It was wide awake. The house hadn't changed much. Peeling paint, a wind chime still hanging by a frayed string. But when Naya stepped onto that porch, time folded. It had been 5 years. 5 years since her mother Loretta had stood at that very door whispering, "You'll come home, baby. Just not yet." Nia didn't cry. Not yet. She walked slowly inside each step, drawing memories from the walls. The house breathed with silence. But it wasn't empty. It held things. Secrets. And something else she hadn't expected to find. Behind the bottom drawer in her mother's old dresser, she felt it. A loose panel. A soft push. And there it was, a small dented tin box. She carried it to the window and opened the lid. Inside were layers of paper carefully folded, brittle at the edges. A bundle of unopened letters with her name written in ink now faded to brown. Legal forms, a stamped envelope labeled DOJ Formal Misconduct Petition, draft only. And beneath them all, one letter, opened, worn, handwritten. Her mother's voice came alive between the lines. They hoped to break you before you understood who you are. You were never meant to survive. But you did. That alone is power. And power needs purpose. Nia folded the letter slowly. The sunlight shifted behind her, casting her shadow against the wall, tall, still, and unshaken. Later that week, she walked back into the courtroom not as a defendant, not as a victim, but as something else. She approached Judge Avery Sinclair during recess. No audience, no cameras, just truth. Avery looked up, her eyes tired from the weight of the case, but clear-focused. Ms. Holloway. Nia didn't say much. She just extended the documents, the petition draft, the preserved letters, the one note her mother had actually opened and underlined. Avery took them gently, like they might tear from breath alone. The judge sat with them in chambers that evening. We know this now because a clerk mentioned how Avery asked to be left alone. The lights were dimmed, no gavel, no robe, just her, the truth, and 5 years of silence. When she returned to the bench the next day, her demeanor was different, still reserved, but something had softened. She didn't say a word about the documents. Not yet. She didn't need to. Her eyes found Nia's and held there just a second longer than usual. Meanwhile, outside that cold courtroom, something else bloomed. Someone had started painting on the long, vacant brick wall across from the courthouse. It began with just a sketch lines in white chalk, then strokes of vivid blue and gold. No one knew who started it, but by day 3, it had taken form. A mural. It showed Nia standing with her back straight, one arm raised, not in defiance, but with purpose. In her hand, a white envelope sealed in red wax. The word exoneration glowed faintly across its face. Behind her, rays of light pierced the darkness like morning breaking through years of storm. The bottom corner carried a simple phrase. She spoke. The city listened. When Nia passed it for the first time, she stopped. She didn't smile, but something in her eyes steadied. A quiet fire. Tessa stood beside her. "That's you now," she whispered. Nia shook her head. "No," she said softly. "That's who I've always been. They just buried it for a while." And with that, she turned back toward the courthouse. The real fight wasn't over. But now she knew. She wasn't walking into it alone. Courtroom 3B was unusually quiet that morning. Not tense, not hostile, just still. Like everyone could feel something was about to break loose, not in chaos, but in clarity. Jordan Fields, the defense attorney, stood with calm precision. His closing statement had been prepared, polished, every word chosen with care. But just as he was about to begin, he paused. Because Nia Holloway stood. She didn't rise fast or dramatically. She just stood the way someone does when they're tired of being spoken for. "Your Honor," she said, her voice steady. "May I speak, Avery?" Sinclair didn't hesitate. "You may." Nia stepped forward. No notes, no podium, just herself. "They didn't just jail me," she began. "They erased me. They took my name and replaced it with a case number. They replaced my voice with a plea I never wanted to make. And they replaced the truth with silence." She looked at the jurors. Some had been skeptical when the trial began. Some still were. But now, Not one looked away. This isn't just about a punch or a parking lot. It's about a system that let 3 officers turn a teenager into a headline and a courtroom that never asked why. She inhaled slow. This is me rewriting. No one clapped. No one moved. Even Jordan, usually quick with a reassuring nod, just stood still, letting her words settle like ash over years of fire. Judge Sinclair gave a slight nod. Then, we'll proceed. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. When they returned, the foreman's hands trembled slightly. We, the jury, find Officer Kyle Benton guilty of abuse of authority, falsification of official record, and obstruction of justice. A breath swept through the room. Audible. Almost a gasp. We further recommend that Officers Dean Wallace and Richard Crowley be referred for disciplinary review and immediate suspension pending investigation. In the back of the room, someone whispered, "Finally." Kyle's attorney, Marcus Grant, didn't speak. His jaw tightened. His client stared blankly ahead as if the words hadn't reached him yet. Judge Sinclair raised her voice, not out of volume, but gravity. "This court failed you once, Ms. Holloway. We won't again." She looked directly at Kyle. "This verdict is not the end. It is a door opening toward what the law should have been all along." Then turning to Nia and to you, "You were not wrong to speak. You were just too early for people willing to listen." News broke within the hour. CNN, Reuters, even BBC carried the story, "Former inmate secures conviction of officer who framed her." By evening, the Department of Justice released a public statement. A federal investigation had been launched into every case Kyle Benton had touched during his tenure. Dozens of convictions were now under review. And Tessa Monroe, true to her word, released her feature article on the Truth Circuit that night. It began with one line, "They caged a girl, and she came back holding the key." The response was immediate. Thousands of shares. Letters pouring in from former inmates, retired officers, teachers, mothers. Some angry, some ashamed, many inspired. Outside the courthouse, the mural had changed again. This time, a new hand had added to it beneath the image of Nia holding the envelope, a phrase in bold. "We don't forgive systems. We rewrite them." And beneath that, just 3 words. Her truth. Heard. Nia stood quietly at the edge of the crowd, watching people take photos, wiping their eyes. Tessa leaned over. "You did it." But Nia shook her head. "No," she said. "I began it." And with that, she walked away. Not toward the past, not even toward peace, but forward into something that finally felt real. Finally hers. It had been a year. Not a loud year. Not a triumphant, banner-waving kind of year. Just steady. Quiet. Like rain on rooftops after a storm too long ignored. Nia Holloway didn't move to a big city. She didn't join a law firm. She didn't run for office. Instead, she chose a small brick building off Juniper and 8th, just 3 blocks from the bus stop where it all began. A community center. 1 classroom. 15 kids. And on most mornings, her laugh could be heard before the bell even rang. She didn't teach law. She taught reading and listening and how to raise your hand even if your voice shakes. One morning, a boy named Khalil stayed after class. 7 years old, big eyes, smudged glasses. He looked up at her and asked Miss Holloway, "Were you ever scared?" She didn't answer right away. She knelt beside him, smiled gently. "Yeah, all the time. But that's not the part that matters. What does that they blinked first?" Khalil didn't quite understand, but one day he would. That afternoon, Nia drove out to the edge of town. There was no ceremony, no flowers, no crowd, just the sound of wind brushing through overgrown grass. She knelt beside the headstone that read, "Loretta Holloway." She believed. Anyway. And in her hands, Nia held one last letter, written the night before, folded neatly, taped shut. She placed it gently on the grave, pressing the corners so it wouldn't blow away. "You were right, Mama," she whispered. I made them say it, not scream it, not beg for it. Just say it out loud where the silence used to be. Back in town, the mural still stood. The city had repainted sidewalks, rebuilt fences, rezoned districts. But the wall with Nia's mural untouched. She was there in color. A woman holding an envelope stamped exonerated. Sunlight behind her. Eyes forward. And this time no graffiti. No slurs. No attempts to cover it up. Just a quiet street. And the kind of silence that meant, we heard. Reporters had stopped calling. The trial had faded from headlines. But every so often someone would sit outside the mural just to look. Not to take a photo, just to sit. They weren't there for fame. They were there because somehow her story sounded a little like theirs. One evening, Tessa Monroe visited the center. She watched Nia read to her students, voice-soft eyes glowing like the courtroom was a lifetime ago. After class, they sat outside on the curb. No cameras. Just a soda between them. "You ever think of writing it down?" Tessa asked. Nia chuckled. What the trial? No. The rest of it. The parts they didn't see. "You already did that part?" "Yeah, but your voice, it's different." Nia smiled. Not proud, not smug, just still. "That's because it's mine now." A year after the verdict, the DOJ released its final report. 27 cases linked to Kyle Benton had been overturned. Dean Wallace had resigned. Crowley never returned to duty. And Marcus Grant? He never took another civil rights case again. But Nia didn't follow the updates closely. She didn't need to. She'd already lived the real headline "Black woman rewrites the ending," and so the city kept moving. New buses came. Old buildings came down. But on the corner of 8th and Vine, the mural remained, not because it was protected, but because it didn't need to be. No one painted over her name, because finally, they knew they couldn't. If this story moved you, let it move others too. Nia's journey wasn't just about clearing her name. It was about reclaiming her voice, about rising after being erased, and reminding us all that silence may delay justice, but it can never bury it forever. Because truth, when spoken with courage, echoes louder than any lie. If you believe stories like Nia's matter, if they make you feel something, question something, or remember something, please give this video a like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Mr. Max Stories for more powerful human stories like this one. Your support isn't just a number, it's fuel. It keeps our team going, creating stories that challenge, uplift, and matter. From all of us at Mr. Max Stories, thank you for listening, thank you for feeling, and thank you for not looking away. Until next time, stay kind, stay curious, and never stop seeking truth.